Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, dear cloud subscribers. So, I noticed that until now, I didn't really record much cloud content, especially in terms of breakdowns, walkthroughs, time lapses, anything. The characters are almost done. We're really getting into retopology right now. So all the teenagers, all the main players of the film are basically completed in terms of design. And that's a bit sad. I didn't really get to record anything. So now that I'm getting more into the animal characters, the critters of the movie, I really wanted to make sure that at least some of that gets captured on video. I get to sprinkle some commentary on top and really get to record a bit of the process in a similar way as I did it for the Settlers project. If you watched that, where I kind of made sure that for the first couple of characters, I really recorded the entire process. I was just in quarantine at home, sitting there on my laptop and just recording the entire thing and talking over it, and then editing it down a little bit, and uploading it to the cloud. So this is sort of the same thing. So this is the lineup of the animal characters. And this is just the initial blocking. It was really just about getting the concepts, which I can just show over here. These are the concept arts for the bird, which is sort of more of the main character for the animals. This one actually has a bigger part in the story. There's a little bit of drawings for expressions and poses, which is super nice, and a little bit of drawovers for the anatomy, or like at least some simplified way of it. The bird is basically already done. I'm going to show it maybe in a moment, but the sculpting is done. I'm getting into retopology for that one, but the snail is now the next one. And this one, the snail actually happens to be in the most... happens to have the most amount of screen time out of all the animals. So, and it's going to be a lot of snails. This is actually an animal that we scatter around a lot. The only one that's kind of unique is this chunky snail, which only happens to be in basically one shot of the entire movie as kind of a joke. But mostly we're working with these sorts of snails. Then there's the Ladybug, which is more of, I wouldn't call it a prop, but it's part of the character design of Elder Sprite. He kind of always has this Ladybug on his lap or in his hands, and it's really connected to him. He used to have a rose staff, but we kind of got rid of that and instead gave him this Ladybug, which there's more ladybugs in the story, but they're more in the background. And there's the spider. This one, the sprites actually ride them at some point, but other than that, there's only really a couple of shots where the sprites are interacting with the spider, and Victoria, or Vicky, one of the teenager characters, is stomping one of them. I'm just getting saying a little bit of context, but it's not that important. And then there's the butterflies, which are the most in the background. They are often very small on the screen, and they only really get some more close-up screen time when we get more into Sprite Village. So really important are the bird and the snail. So if I go in here, this is the original blocking, and this is really just to kind of get a feel of the overall shapes and the proportions. I kind of put the sprite in here just for comparison. And if I just open this up, I think I actually still have some images in here. No, I removed them. That's fine. Where I had Victoria as the only human character in comparison to get a better sense of the size. But yeah, making this lineup file is really helpful for seeing the characters in comparison and kind of tweaking the proportions and some of the elements so that they feel more like they belong into the same world. This was something that we constantly did for the human characters from the beginning, basically. And yeah, this is basically all of them. Some of them actually are almost close to finish just by doing the blocking because their shape language is just so simplified. So I don't think I'm gonna do much video recording on the spider and the butterfly. They're really simple. But the snails are interesting. They do have a little bit more detail, little bit more nuance in their shape. And the only one which could also be interesting to show is really just the bird. I can just open up the bird sculpting file, for example. And okay, this is it. So I can just change the lighting setup. So this was the, oh no, this is the final bird sculpt. There's a few shape keys in here, some for just tweaks and some for doing some expressions. So just like, how does it look like when we open the mouth? How does it look like if we deform the eyelids? There's plenty of material on the cloud. If you go into the asset progression folders, there's like a full timeline of everything we did on any of the characters, and you can just browse through, click through the images, and read the descriptions. There's still some stuff on there that isn't properly named because we kind of just uploaded everything at once at some point. But that's being fixed. And yeah, there's plenty of stuff here. So we started out with the blocking. I do now try to do the blocking in pose. So just the blocking and the sculpting should be that's something we noticed with the human characters, and it really kicked us in the butt. Because we did a constant review process and feedback back and forth with the director, Matthew Loon, and the production designer, Ricky Niava, which is amazing. It was really insightful, but we were still in our character creation process really streamlined on really trimmed towards making the characters as fast as possible and bringing them into the pipeline and into the production workflow as fast as possible. So when we were sculpting characters on Spring, on Settlers, on Coffee Run, anything really, they were directly sculpted in a resting pose, in a T pose or A pose. We sculpted them and modeled stuff as neutral as possible, so they can immediately get retopologized and immediately get rigged. Like you just breeze through the pipeline, which is efficient, but what we really noticed what was the downfall of that is you don't really get a good sense of the appeal of the character. So in the case of Sprite Fright, the concept art was really loose, which was great because we got to experiment a lot in terms of shape language and making wacky designs. But the translation process into 3D was too production focused by just making the characters in a T-pose with a neutral expression, and people just did not understand how this can be appealing in the film. So with the animals, I'm trying to correct that of just sculpting them in a pose. I don't even worry that much about symmetry. I don't worry that much about making sure that this can be immediately posed in some way. I just want it to look appealing. So this was the first test, already with wings closed, because also with wings open, just to kind of toggle between. And this already gave us a good sense of where this is going. Like, even though it's just a couple of spheres put into each other, it gives us a good feeling of what the proportions are supposed to be. And then we put that into the lineup file, and we can see how this is supposed to look like in comparison to the other characters. Once that was approved, once everyone was kind of happy with that, I went further into sculpting. This is where I kind of went back and restored some symmetry just a little bit, but not too much. I didn't pay too close attention that the wings and the feathers were very straight, and the legs, for example, are really spread out. I didn't really pay too much attention on actually making it a riggable pose. It just needed to be appealing enough and symmetrical enough that I can save time and still present this in a way that actually makes people understand how this character is supposed to look in the film. So this was at first kind of just sculpted with the remesher and then roughly retopologized so that I can make some shape keys for expressions. There's still a multi-res modifier on there to get some of the details for the sculpt, but there's not much detail in general. So I was just able to kind of breeze through this. I did make an alternate shape with the wings closed, just to experiment how we're going to solve this problem, which is really interesting. Like when you close the wings, where do I have it? Here, wings closed. You get this ugly line. And we experimented. There was a bit of back and forth between me and Matt Demeta, our rigger, and Simon, our shading and texturing artist. And just how we could solve this, of just like making this transition here as smooth as possible. And we tried different things, like of just having a mesh here to mask it with shading, or of just retopologizing a whole new body or like a new segment over here so that it just smoothly transitions, or just making the wing completely separate and then just kind of stitching it on top however we want. But it's making it a bit more too complicated. We had a discussion with Andy, our art director, and he said that since we see the bird basically just with the wings closed in 2 shots, really, and mostly from the front or 3/4, we could just fake this, like, or just kind of ignore the problem mostly, and just pick our battles. Because if we put a lot of polish into everything, we're just never going to finish the movie. But yeah, this is essentially the final bird, and this was brought further into retopology. I could just close this, and now it's really about continuing with the snail. This was where kind of